Have you ever felt overwhelmed when trying to pick out a score or a piece of music for the piano? If you were trying to learn a Beethoven sonata, you might have over 1,000 options. And how do you know which one is best suited for you? My name's Crescendo, and I'm a professional pianist and piano teacher. And in this video, I'm going to give you some brief ideas on what to look for when picking out a score. Let's go. I remember when I was a piano student that picking out new music and picking out a new score was always so exciting. It always had that great feeling of getting to start on new piano music. When I was a young student, I was usually given a score, or maybe my teacher told me to purchase a particular score. And now I can see that there are so many scores out there that if you had to go buy one, it can be a bit overwhelming. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm still a performing pianist, and I also am a piano teacher who sees about 50 students a week. And throughout the years, I've learned just how important it is to have a score that suits you while you're playing it. Now, the best score might be different for everyone. For example, an experienced performer who has performed many Beethoven sonatas might prefer a different piano score than a student who is picking up their first Beethoven sonata. These scores could look completely different but be great for each player. Here are some general tips that I've compiled about what to look for in a score. First, I think you have to think about where you are in your piano journey, and this will help influence maybe which score you choose. For example, if you're a beginner player, you might opt towards having a score that has more editorial comments, more markings to help you figure out how to interpret the music. Rather than, if you are a more experienced player, you might prefer more of a pure text, where there's only what the composer has written so that you can interpret the music from that. For an example, I've chosen a few scores here to show you. The first one I'll be showing you is the Beethoven Selected Easiest Sonata Movements for Piano, edited by Maurice Hinson, published by ALFRED. As we look at these first pages, it has lots of information about Beethoven and the piano sonata, how Beethoven played. There's more information about the pieces found in here. For further reading, there's even a suggested order of study. So there's lots of things that are included in this as compared to the Bärenreiter text edition of the piano sonatas, which does include a foreword, but is more talking about the sources that it draws from, the pedal releases, the ties and slurs, what different markings are made, the accidentals. So less general knowledge about the music and more specific knowledge about what is included in that particular score. So now that you've made the determination about what might be important in a score, I really think that there are a few things that you should look for in every score. The first thing that I would consider when picking out a specific score would be, is the score legible? Now this might sound like a stupid question to you at first, but let me explain. Now, some of the better editions of music will have music that fills out the whole page. It will also be very legible as far as the printing and very dark onto the page. And this will really help you if you're like me and are a nighttime practicer and practice way past midnight on some nights. It can be a major help for the eyes. Another thing to think about with the paper is that sometimes editors will use a bright white paper to print on, other times it might be a more cream colored paper. Now this is strictly a personal preference, but I personally like the cream colored paper that some editors use. Again, I find it easier on the eyes and less strain. Another problem that is not often mentioned or thought about is the size of the book or the flexibility of the binding. Some of the larger piano books now are occasionally made with a spiral binding, which isn't always the most durable, but it will sit nicely up on the piano music rack. I would also be careful about the number of pages in the book. Sometimes if you have a book that's over 300 pages, if you're trying to play a piece that's in the beginning or the end of the book, well, good luck with getting that book to stay open on the piano rack, because it's going to close right shut. However, some companies account for this in their binding and have a stay open binding, which allows the book to sit more easily on the music rack. As an alternative, if you bought the book, sometimes making copies of the music and putting them into a binder can be a good alternative. But this can also take away from time spent with the music. Another major consideration when picking out a score is fingering. Now personally, I like to have a score that includes some fingering. because it gives me a starting place to work from. Even if I don't use the fingering written in the music, I can cross it out and write in my own, and it will give me an idea of where to start. As a beginner, I think fingering is one of the most important things when starting a piece. So for some of my beginning students starting Bach pieces, I will purposefully pick out a score that has fingering written in, as most text does not, and I will give that to them so that they will be on the right track from the very beginning. However, some new text scores may not have any fingering written in because the composer did not write it in, or the piece may be so new that there has not been a chance for any editor to come in and suggest fingering for the player. Whatever the case may be, I personally prefer to look for scores that have fingering already written in. As a piano teacher, this next one is very important to me personally, and that is get a score that has measure numbers written into it. Whether I am teaching in person or online, it's much easier for me to give a specific measure number recommendation rather than trying to describe to the student where it is on the page. As the student, this is also very helpful because then you will know exactly where to practice. You can write down measure numbers in your practicing journal or whatever you may be using to record your practicing. Obviously, not all scores are going to have measure numbers written into them, so of course you can go through once you purchase the score and write in the measure numbers into the music. But if you can find one that does have measure numbers, that's just more time that you get to practice the music. My next tip is that some pieces may have a specific performer or musicologist edit the music or provide commentary, which can sometimes be interesting. For example, I have the Arthur Schnabel edition of the Beethoven Pathetique Sonata. Now, Schnabel was one of the more respected teachers of his time period and was often hailed as having some of the greatest insight into accurate representation and performances of both Beethoven and Schubert's music. Now, I don't always necessarily agree with all of his finger markings and everything that he has written into the score, but it definitely gives me another big perspective. Now, my final piece of advice, if you're a piano student, ask your teacher what edition they prefer before you go out and purchase one. Now, as a piano performance major in college, I was quickly able to understand whether or not my teacher preferred the score that I was using. Sometimes I would open my backpack and start to pull it out, and I could look at their face, and that would tell me everything that I needed to know about the score that I had brought. But don't hesitate to ask your teacher which score you should choose. I'm sure they will always have an opinion about which ones to look at when purchasing new music. Now, I invite all of you to go down into the comments section and let me know if there's anything that I left out that you use while choosing a score. Also, let me know what your favorite publisher, edition, if you have any kind of favorite music, let me know what it is. And of course, I would really appreciate it if you found anything in this video to be helpful to you, to like the video and even subscribe to my channel where I'm posting lots of videos about tips, tutorials, techniques, and even covers on the piano. I really appreciate all the support. Thanks, and I'll see you guys in the next video.